React Native was one of the biggest and boldest bets that Facebook ever made. And when it got started, I'll admit, it was a bit rocky. I can see why people were skeptical for the first few years. But it's been 10 years since the original release of React Native. And man, has it progressed unbelievably since. Sure, React Native's not at version 1.0 yet, but that hasn't stopped it from being the core powering the entire PlayStation operating system, or one of the most fundamental pieces in Windows, powering things like, the start menu. It's pretty nuts how far this tech has gotten. But how has this affected people actually building with React Native? One company, Shopify, just shared their reports after using React Native for 5 years. And there is a lot that we can learn from this. I'm super excited to cover all of this with you guys, but since neither Shopify nor Facebook are paying me, we have to cover the bills quick. So quick sponsor break, and then we'll get right to it. Deploying apps has never been easier. As long as they're using JavaScript, they don't have a database, they don't have auth, they don't need a CDN, you don't mind running them on a server, or you're okay with running them serverless. There's so much to think about when you're trying to deploy. What if you could just link a GitHub repo and not have to worry about it, regardless of the tech? That's what today's sponsor, Savala, is here to do. I'm just going to show you my dashboard because I'm still blown away with how easy they make things. Here's a random app that I deployed. It's a Laravel demo, but this works just as great with pretty much every other tech. I've had a lot of fun playing with it with Elixir. Works great with Rails too. And obviously, the Node.js ecosystem is fully supported as well. What's cool here, though, is that I have a dedicated server on the right there that has all of its specs and everything. Cool, awesome, makes sense. What is that in front of it? Cloudflare. If you're actually just using one cloud, you are doing certain things less than ideal, almost certainly. Savala uses Google Cloud for hosting their servers, but Google's offerings for DDoS protection and CDNs don't even come close to Cloudflare's. Not even AWS's do. So you get the best prices and reliability on the server side, which they're hosting with GCP, but as soon as you need DDoS protection, CDNs, edge caching, and all the other really helpful things Cloudflare does, they just get put right there. Right now, I just have the DDoS protection on, but if I want all the static assets from this app to be hosted in Cloudflare instead so that users get way better performance for those assets, I click Settings, I click On. That's it. Now my static assets are static. Do you know how hard that is to do everywhere else in the world? I don't even want to talk about it. And don't get me started with the CI process. I'm at the point where I don't want to review code if I can't click Visit Preview. I'm just used to that workflow, and if I can't see it working, I don't trust it works. Sadly, setting up automatic CI to create preview environments and deployments for you on every single pull request is both really hard and really expensive. Unless you're using Savala, they'll set it up for you automatically with their pipeline workflow, and you can just click one button to get a PR build up instantaneously. It's so helpful. If you're shipping servers and you're tired of dealing with all the work that means, check out Savala today at soydev.link/Savala, and you'll get $50 of free credit added to your account. 5 years of React Native at Shopify. This is going to be a fun one. There's a great post that the CEO of Shopify made about React Native a while back. If somebody can find this for me, you will be a legend forever. Quick shout out to Chad Linsky here for finding this particular post that I knew existed but has been deleted. Wayback Machine's backup. Somebody had replied to an employee at Shopify asking, why are you doing this with React Native? It failed for Airbnb. Are you only doing this for new products? To which Toby replied with this classic meme saying, this is Airbnb's mobile team, showing that they were so close to striking diamond and just gave up too early. But when asked why Airbnb struggled with React Native, why would Shopify ever bet on it when it was so clearly a failure? Toby replied with that meme. He deletes all of his old posts every year or so that's why we lost this, sadly. But yeah, the point here being they've been very defensive of their decision for a while, and it went really, really well for them. If you want to better understand why I think that Airbnb article and most of Airbnb's engineering is utter fucking garbage, I have a whole video. I think about this article a lot, which was my response years later to that awful article by Airbnb, and my video made them look bad enough that they actually went back and updated the blog post saying it's super out of date, don't reference this anymore. Yeah. 5 years ago, we announced that React Native is the future of mobile at Shopify. Today, we're excited to share the progress we've made, lessons we've learned, and what the future holds. To recap, we decided to switch to React Native for 3 main reasons. The first point was pretty obvious, right at once. Stop building the same features twice, once for iOS and once for Android. Point 2 was talent portability. Enable devs to work fluently across iOS, Android, and web. This is a really big deal. You shouldn't need your product team for a given feature. Something like, how do I put it? Like for Twitch, the chat was a team. We had a team that just built chat on Twitch. The fancy thing here, people send messages in. That was a really hard thing to build. But once we had it working on web, we had to hire different engineers for iOS and Android to come in and port it to those platforms. And those engineers weren't on the chat team. They were on the iOS and Android teams. They might have had a title that said chat engineer, but they really were part of the mobile team. So in order to make changes across platforms, you needed different devs to be aligned and make different changes at different times. And the chaos of orchestrating all of this was hellish. And that fundamentally comes down to a technical difference, which is insane. The fact that the tech is different enough between web and mobile, you now have to have different teams updating this feature, sucks, because companies work much better when they're split by features, not by tech stacks. So the talent portability thing, I absolutely agree with. Just the way that companies are structured benefits greatly from having a platform that a given member of a team can contribute across all the different surfaces. It means that keeping the iOS app and the website in sync is much easier. I can't tell you how often I have problems where the website has a feature but the phone app doesn't, or vice versa. I currently have a fun problem with my DMs on Twitter, where I did a call with somebody on Twitter, and now I can't open my DMs with them on the website. I can only access them on the phone, because when I open them on the website, the whole site crashes, which is hilarious. And then point 3, kind of aligns with all of this. Ship more value. Spend more time delivering value to users instead of chasing feature parity. The amount of effort that goes into just making sure that features are met between platforms is hard to fathom. It's absurd. And React Native making it easier to keep these platforms in parity is a massive win. But if the apps are going to be worse and slower, is it really worth it? Let's see. According to them, the transition has been quite successful. Not having to build the same feature twice has given them a step change in productivity. Engineers are able to work across web and mobile, allowing teams to do more with the same number of people and unlock new growth opportunities. Maintaining parity between iOS and Android feature sets has become a non-issue, freeing up capacity to ship a lot more value. The apps are blazing fast and more stable than they used to be, 99.9% crash-free sessions, and less than 500 milliseconds to load the screen. And they continue to leverage the native technologies wherever it is the best tool for the job, thereby giving them the best of both worlds. It's again, one of the biggest benefits of React Native is the other half, the native side. React Native isn't a platform that is abstracted from the native layer. It is built into the native layer. The JavaScript is just telling native what to do. That's why it is so powerful, because you still get to fully use the native platform. You're just structuring the UI slightly differently. Over the past 5 years, they've migrated all of their apps over to React Native. Instead of using a one-size-fits-all approach to do so, each team chose when and how to migrate their apps. This allowed them to continue shipping features while also aligning with the company's strategy of leveraging React Native. Shop was originally only on iOS. They rewrote it in React Native and then shipped to both platforms by the end of 2019. Just 6 months later, they updated Inbox, which was also iOS only, rewrote it in React Native and shipped to both platforms by the end of Q2 2020. The point of sale system, which is one of the most important pieces, because this is what people have set up at their storefronts to check out customers. It's a massive deal, and it was one of the biggest concern points they had. If I recall, they were doing a lot of research on memory footprint and performance because of the POS system, and they expected React Native to have a delta that was worse than the native platform, and it ended up being better than the previous native attempts they had done to build it. I bet we can even find that in the original article. I'm curious. Yeah, here it is. They did a 6-week experiment on the flagship point of sale app to see if it would be a good candidate for a rewrite in React Native. It is kind of funny that the abbreviation for it is POS as they are testing out React Native. Pretty funny. The biggest thing that they learned, though, is that their retail merchants expect almost 2x the responsiveness in the POS app because of the muscle memory of using the app while also talking to customers. This is a really big deal. There's almost like tiers of how good an app has to be, and those tiers are based on how much time you spend in the app. I would argue that there are roughly 4 tiers, I would say. Tier 1 is things you only touch once. For some examples, imagine like the upload thing dashboard, where you go, you set up your app, and you probably don't ever have to touch it again. Or like government registration stuff. Like when you're getting your license renewed, you only have to touch that every like 8 to 10 years. Who cares? Things that you don't touch ever have much less reason to improve the UX, because even if you do, no one will appreciate it because they're not going to see it, and they're not going to be able to contrast the two. They're not going to be able to build familiarity. And that's kind of the biggest point here is as we go down the tiers, familiarity is the key differentiator. So there's things you only touch once. There's things you touch a lot in a short burst. So this would be things like Amazon, where you go to Amazon, you add some things to your cart, you check out, you don't go back. You spend a lot of time focused on the experience in that window. Other shops like, I don't know, Walmart, eBay, most e-commerce, I would argue, fits into this. So you would think Shopify does. We'll get to why they don't in a minute. Ooh, travel apps is a really good point for this one too, where you're spending a lot of time in it when you're first there, and then you don't really touch it again. Great example. The next here is the one we're probably most familiar with, because this is where most time is spent in software. Applications you check often. I would potentially make the argument there's two different tiers here, because something like your Stripe dashboard and Twitter are different just with the expectations of interactions. But for the sake of making this easy to understand, I'm going to put both in the same spot. So my Stripe dashboard, it's a thing I check a lot, even though it is literally down at the moment, which is insane to me, because I want to know how my business is doing. I want to check disputes. I want to check what our MRR is. I want to see how the business is. Also, my analytics dashboards. I go there, I set them up, and it's funny because different parts of the analytics dashboard might fit here or here, but the core experience is absolutely here. When I go to Posthog, I'm not configuring everything every time, but when I am, I'm really intently in it. When I'm not, we see how it goes. So another thing I would put in here would be a platform like Twitch or YouTube or Twitter. This is kind of why I wanted to separate them though, because the amount of time you spend in a session on these is very different from the session time on these, but the overall user behavior is relatively similar. You open it up to check it and browse around in it for a long amount of time. But now we get to this fourth tier, which is one that I think is really underappreciated. I'm going to call it muscle memory tools. Things that you spend so much time in that are often open for so long that they'll get burned into the screen. Tools that are literally the purpose of the device that you are using them on. There's a pretty sizable gap between these things, which is why I kind of want to do a 3.5 for this stuff. You know what? I'm going to do that. We're going to do 3.5, which is applications you hang out in. And that'll be Twitch, YouTube, Twitter, etc. But then we end up in this muscle memory tier. There's going to be things like NeoVim or front desk software where the person using it is spending 8 hours a day in it, and little efficiency wins matter a ton. This is also, for better or worse, things like Salesforce, which is why it was so revolutionary at the time, because the quality of CRMs before Salesforce was garbage, and now Salesforce is kind of the floor for them because it raised things so high, but it also kind of sucks. People are saying power user tools like Photoshop or Cursor. I would argue those are kind of between here. Like, it's hard to put into words the gap between a Cursor user and a NeoVim user, but if you know it, you know it. And something like Salesforce requires like a level of discipline that even Photoshop doesn't. A person who spends 8 hours a day in Salesforce is more fluent with that software and its quirks than almost any person using Adobe anything. There's a real gap there. The reason I bring all of this up is because of the point of sale systems. These systems are a thing that is open on a device at your front desk, at your shop, while you are also conversing with people. The expectation you have to click a button that will always be in the same place without even looking at it and know it will do the right thing. You could argue that the line here is a line of, I'll put it in quotes, can I do it without looking? Like if your screen was to fail or have a chunk missing from it or something like that, can you still navigate the application? If you can, I would absolutely put it into this tier. And if you can't, it's probably closer to this one. But I hope this will help others understand there's a level of sophistication in the people who are doing checkout at your grocery store in terms of how fluent they are with the piece of software, how well they know the amount of time between each button press. Nobody understands the characteristics of latency when you click a button, like a cashier at a store that has a lot of customers. I know this because I used to be a cashier at Staples for a little bit when I was in high school. And the best people at that store, the ones who've been working there for a while, they could move around that POS system faster than Prime can move around NeoVim, straight up. So if you're building this in JavaScript, probably going to be really slow and throw everyone off, right? We go back to this article, remember, from 2019, where Shopify was first exploring React Native. They learned about the expectations the point of sale users had and how well this application would work. Their expectation was that the React Native version would have to be slower. The question was how much slower. Sorry if this video is a bit chaotic. I just spent way too much time trying to find the specific quote that I remember. I didn't find it yet, but I did find this part which I remembered, which was they were trying to get the point of sale app working specifically on lower power configurations of Android, because a lot of these POS systems at these stores were running on crappy old Android phones. They needed to make sure it performed well there. They were impressed with the performance, which we'll get to in a minute. But the coolest part here is that they had estimated 80% code share between the iOS and Android versions. But after implementing it all, we're surprised that it's closer to 95 to 99% for the apps that they were building. Pretty nuts to think that the iOS and Android apps are sharing 99% of their code in some cases. Okay, after hunting through Gemini Advanced, T3 Chat, and a bunch of other sources, I've concluded this quote doesn't seem to exist on the internet anymore. Just take my word for it that at some point in time, the Shopify team publicly stated that not only were they impressed with the performance of React Native on crappy Android phones, it was actually performing better than their native code could, and was hitting performance levels and memory usage levels they didn't think were possible. Sorry for the long tangent. I just wanted to prove the performance was insane. We'll get there throughout this, I'm sure. As I was saying here, the POS system was moved in Q2 of 2021. You'll notice a pretty consistent cadence of 6 months to a year for each of these drops, but they were eventually able to move the Balance app, the Collabs app, and the Shopify app all over. The results have been nuts. So what have they learned? First point, React Native apps are fast. We care deeply about performance at Shopify. As our CEO Toby says, not all fast software is great, but all great software is fast. I bet he loves T3 Chat. The biggest question we had when switching to React Native, and the main reason we didn't do it sooner, was whether we'd be able to achieve our performance goals with it. Before making the decision to switch, we did extensive prototyping, which led to promising results. We also saw all the work that Meta was doing to eliminate performance bottlenecks and identified areas, like lists, where we could help. We predicted that React Native would get much faster soon, so we went all in. Fast forward 5 years, and React Native apps are fast. We've achieved sub 500 millisecond screen loads in all of the Shopify apps, and you can learn how we did that here, and here. All sources to different talks and things they have done. Phenomenal resources. Honestly, Shopify's been a great open source contributor in the world of React Native stuff. They have been awesome. Things like Flash List, which was their list component they open sourced, is super performant. They achieved similar performance in all of their apps. Just like native, you have to apply good patterns and techniques to eliminate performance bottlenecks. After spending years building mobile apps at scale with both native and React Native, we found that native doesn't automatically mean fast, and React Native also doesn't automatically mean slow. React Native's come a long way in the last few years, and you can now use it to build world-class apps. We anticipate that this will continue to get easier as the framework matures and team develop more expertise. We will continue to share our learnings with the community. So performance is solved. Even if I can't find that quote, you need to take my word for it and all of the Shopify customers' words for it. Performance is relatively solved. So what about everything else? What are the other benefits? One of the biggest, in my opinion, by far, is hot reloading. Once you have a hot reloading environment, it's hard to go back. When you can just save your code and immediately see the change in the app, your iteration speed goes up absurdly. As they say here, the ability to see your changes reflected instantly within React Native has been a total game changer. It's one of our biggest pain points with Native. Given the size of their code bases, it took several minutes for even the most trivial changes to be compiled and run on an emulator or a physical device. This wastes time and it breaks developer flow. React Native's hot reloading completely eliminates the problem. I don't think you guys understand how screwed some of these giant native apps are. I have heard about compile times for things like Instagram in days. Measured, yes, in days. Not minutes, not hours, days. It's unbelievable how big a win this is. Another big one was TypeScript and how it unlocks talent portability. Suddenly, engineers only need to know TypeScript to be able to contribute all over the company. TypeScript has become ubiquitous, and we've seen great success with developers transitioning between the React Web and the React Native apps. Web developers find it much easier to start working on mobile with React Native as opposed to native iOS and Android development. Similarly, mobile developers familiar with React Native find it easy to work with on the web. This is another super underrated side effect here. I experienced this myself with some of the companies I helped staff up, where we had mobile engineers that picked up React Native to contribute to the overhauled native apps, and then they knew React, and suddenly they were contributing to the web. I know a few people who went from iOS devs to web devs because React Native didn't scare them, it excited them. It was a way to start experiencing technology outside of their usual. And the result is they went all the way, possibly, arguably even too far. One of my more controversial takes that I love to drop when we're talking about mobile devs is where they fit on the spectrum. Hopefully we all agree that on one side of this, there is back end. On the other side, there is front end. Obviously, not perfect summary here. And it goes further where there are like systems people infra people, OS people, whatever. Front end to back end is a spectrum. We hopefully all agree here. Where does mobile go on this spectrum? Historically, my belief was that mobile would go between the two. Because on one hand, you're focused on the user experience and the UI, the buttons and whatnot, like web, but you're also building with native code in the native platform, like you would, traditionally at least, on the backend side. What was very hard for me to accept was that the reality of mobile is more here. If you think web devs are scared of servers, talk to a mobile dev. Mobile devs are so scared of servers that Firebase exists. The only reason Firebase has survived into modern times is because mobile devs are that scared of servers. They hate them. The moment you tell a mobile dev they have to know a thing that a server does, it's like their brain turns off. It's like talking about CSS to a Vim person. They're just not built that way. But if a mobile dev can make the jump here, all of a sudden, these gaps don't feel as massive, and they are way more likely to make this gap. And most importantly, they're way more likely to stop fucking using Firebase. We need more devs to jump across these gaps. It's my experience too. I started as a backend dev. React got me to begrudgingly take front end more seriously. I had some experience in mobile in the past. My front end experience made me fall in love with mobile development again. I would not be where I am today if it wasn't for the effort I put into jumping across those gaps. And React Native is a phenomenal technology for encouraging devs to go outside of their main disciplines. And I've seen that a ton. And it's really cool that they called out that it goes both ways, because I don't think this is appreciated enough. It's assumed that the web devs will come in and replace all the mobile devs, and the mobile devs need to just go fuck themselves. That is not the case at all. The magic of all of this is that the mobile devs can now contribute to the web as well. It is a cohesion play, and the only people who don't cohere are the ones who don't want to. And this has become such a problem because a lot of mobile devs picked mobile because they're tired of learning new things. They just want to be on a platform that barely ever changes and continue using the SDK from 4 years ago because they have a person who's using an Android version that's ancient. Those mobile devs hate React Native because it's threatening to shake things up. But the mobile devs who just want to build great apps, many of them have made the move, and the benefits and success they have seen as a result are incredible. As Shopify says here, the flexibility not only opens up more growth opportunities for engineers, but it also increases the staffing flexibility, and it enables teams to accomplish more with the same number of developers. It opens up new opportunities to share code between web and mobile as well, creating more leverage. And to be clear here, this doesn't mean your component system or your pages are being shared between the two. But the complex logic in the things I build is very rarely the UI part. I'm not saying the CSS is easy. It's not. But what I am saying is the state management, the synchronization layer, the data fetching, and all of that architecture, those parts can now be separated as hooks. The same way components can be reused and composed, the hooks that manage the logic and the state can too. And you can break out that state into a package that's shared between the web and the mobile apps. Or honestly, the way I recommend getting started with this, put them all in one folder in your project and copy paste between the two to keep them in sync. You will be amazed at how much easier it is to maintain specific behavior and feature parity between web and mobile if you can copy paste the complex parts between the two. It's magical. Oh shit, we got Evan Bacon here, the legend over from our friends at Expo. Thank you for the support here. The fact that Evan thinks I know what I'm talking about with mobile is the only reason I have the confidence to do this stuff, because I don't ship mobile apps every day. But I talk to mobile devs every day. I do my best to understand this stuff. I am very passionate about mobile. My history is all freaking Android stuff. I want this stuff to be really good. Having devs that can work on multiple platforms is incredibly valuable. It allows you to ship faster and enables devs to take good ideas from one tech and apply them to others in novel ways. This is another one of those underrated things. Good devs can solve problems well in their areas of expertise. Great devs don't sleep until the problems are solved in all of the areas they can see, even if it's not their area of expertise. The most motivated devs are the ones who are going to hop in a code base they've never seen before because there's a bug that's frustrating them. And if your tech stack, if your company culture and architecture is not such that a motivated little Theo that has a problem with the mobile app can't go over and fix it, you're going to burn those engineers out. That's what happened to me at Twitch. Not saying I'm some god-tier legendary engineer, but I did rebuild the whole Twitch app from scratch in a week. And my reward was an HR warning because the mobile team was so mad at me for making them look bad. That is a toxic culture that keeps great engineers from maintaining that energy and motivation. And I know that this is working for Shopify because I talk to a lot of Shopify engineers. Some of the smartest engineers I know, in particular in the performance world, work at Shopify. And when I hear about Shopify acquiring a company that has great engineers or poaching some incredible dev from the web or mobile world, it always makes sense to me because they have a culture where the engineers who care can fix the thing they care about. And if the platform doesn't allow them to, or the mobile team doesn't let people contribute externally, my favorite example of this was back from when I was at Twitch. The mobile team knew that other teams and other engineers wanted to contribute. So in order for them to start, the mobile team enforced a 3 to 6 month boot camp where you would leave your team, join theirs, have almost no meetings and no support, especially during COVID. They might have fixed it since, but it was really bad at the time, in order to allow for a dev who doesn't do iOS or Android and is on a different team to learn how to contribute. And their shining example of this program working was that after the 3-month boot camp, a dev was able to change the localization window and sign up so the languages were sorted based on what region they were in. So your region was most likely to be at the top. That was their shining example of a 3-month investment. And also, by the way, only worked on Android because you could only learn iOS or Android in that bootcamp. How good do you think a motivated engineer is going to feel after doing all of that? I know because my hackathon team was a handful of the engineers that felt like they went insane during the bootcamp and wanted revenge. A stack that allows for motivated engineers to contribute everywhere means motivated engineers will be able to engage that motivation, stay energized, and keep shipping. If you don't want your best engineers to burn out, you should take a serious look at React Native. As they say here, it creates a culture of viewing technologies as tools in a tool belt, which broadens the team's horizons and encourages using the best tool for the job instead of whatever you happen to be most familiar with. Yes, because again, React Native is native. So if the problem you're solving is best solved in the native layer, you can figure it out and do it yourself, or if someone else is better for it, bring them in. But since all of these things are tools, we're not tying our whole identity to one specific way of doing things. All of a sudden, shipping anything becomes way more viable. Chat's fully getting this one. It's so ridiculous, it's hilarious. That should take like 2 hours. I'd rather spend 3 to 6 months remotely at Guantanamo Bay. Yeah, I feel all of you guys with this. It was hellish. There's a reason I quit. Speaking of that tool belt thing and the importance of native, they have a whole section here. Native devs are crucial. And I agree. I really want to make sure that my coverage of this stuff isn't implying that native is bad. The only reason React Native is good is because of native. And it's the complementary nature of the two that makes all of this make any sense at all. Without good native engineers helping, and contributing to React Native, none of this works. As they say here from Shopify, mobile engineers who specialize in iOS and Android are essential to building great mobile apps. There is no replacing experience and taste that comes from having built many mobile products and deeply understanding conventions and usability. This is a super underrated point. I have a whole video dedicated to just this point. It might be out by the time you see this. It might not be. Hopefully soon. It's called The Differences Between Web and Mobile. There are certain things that are fundamentally different from how you operate and navigate in mobile from web. One of the biggest pieces there is how navigation works. You don't have a URL bar in a mobile app. You might replicate it, but then you're going to break the way the stack works. I'm going to tangent way too long if I go too deep here. Just check out that video when it drops. It's a good one. Understanding these differences is key. And a lot of the problems I initially had when I was getting into React Native and native stuff was that the mobile engineers were pissed because they knew the bar for experience on web and the expectations of how web experiences work contradicted what a good native mobile app did. So they were upset, not necessarily because they didn't want JavaScript on their phone. They were upset because the way they expect an app to work often wasn't hit with React Native. Not because React Native is bad, but because web devs would build their mobile apps the same way they built their web apps, which just doesn't work. So as silly as it sounds that the taste and experience of iOS and Android devs are essential for a React Native port, you'd be like, wait, no, shouldn't they be writing code? Yeah. But knowing how users expect a good Android and iOS app to behave is even more essential if the code gets this cheap. And maintaining a high bar for the user expectations with your apps is something that most React Native first devs just don't have the experience to do. But if you've been building iOS and Android apps for years, maybe even decades at this point, you're a really helpful person as companies move more and more towards these stacks, not because you'll be writing native code all day, but because your expectations and your bar is set much better than these React Native first devs. And I would really encourage those native devs, especially if they're watching this, to try your best to not view this as an us versus them thing. I see that a lot. I see this belief that these web devs that don't know what they're doing are coming to our mobile platform and taking it from us and replacing it with JavaScript. Try to view this as an opportunity to teach and educate. This happens to me a lot as a backend dev that moved to web. I have an old controversial video that I still stand behind fully titled Next.js as a Backend Framework, because React was moving more and more to the backend, and Next, by definition, is a backend server-side tool. I saw the opportunity to educate React devs, and I got super excited about teaching people whose history is JS and CSS to think about server-side stuff. I got to teach Dan Abramov, the guy who created Redux and contributed heavily to React. I got to teach him what a cold start was on Lambda. That's so cool and fun and exciting, but viewed the wrong way, that could be seen as, oh, these web devs are so stupid, I'm going to keep them far away from my servers and make them hit an API instead. I see it as a fun, exciting learning opportunity to teach these things you care a lot about to others. And I would really encourage the experienced mobile devs to try and see that opportunity here, because there's going to be a lot more web devs trying to build mobile apps using tech that you may or may not like, but the apps will be terrible, not because the tech is bad, but because the experience isn't there. And if you can help people bridge these gaps, you will be more valuable than all of them combined. So I encourage mobile devs with this level of experience to stop being scared of React Native, not embrace it, don't go all in on it or anything, but take the opportunity to teach those who are trying to make good mobile apps how. Because they want to, they just don't know what good looks like yet. That said, their ability to write native code is still very, very helpful. Don't discount that, but it's the experience and taste they've built over the decades that make them so valuable today. Another big thing they have experience with is platform differences. The difference between two different spec'd Android phones, two different versions of Android across those phones, different resolutions and how those should be handled. There's a lot of things there that need to be deeply understood by the devs building on these platforms, and native expertise makes it way easier for them to do. Also, I would not wish a React Native version bump on my worst enemy. Pretty much every time I have to bump React Native versions in a project, I end up making a new one and just copy pasting all the code over, and it usually works a lot faster. So having native devs that can help figure out those parts and smooth out the chaos is super, super helpful. We invested in training our native mobile developers in React Native through a self-serve course that covered everything they need to know in order to ship production-ready code. Additionally, we set up office hours with devs who are already proficient in React Native to provide support through Q&A sessions, pair programming, and code reviews. I would make the argument they should do this the other way too, where the native devs could give workshops and QA sessions to web devs learning the mobile platform to explain how important these distinctions are. And maybe once my video about web versus mobile comes out, you could drop that in the course too, because it's going to be a pretty good video. I'm really excited about it. They call it that they supplement the other way too, where they added React devs to the mobile teams. Awesome. Building that interop is essential to success here. And again, to emphasize the point of native code, it is crucial. 100% React Native should be seen as an anti-goal. It's great for building features just once, but it's not the right tech for everything. Native is still the best way for building cutting-edge features that leverage device hardware, like 2D and 3D scanning, running AI models on device, stuff like that. It's also better suited for building features that have memory limitations, like home and lock screen widgets, Apple Watch apps, and complications, app intents, and Siri shortcuts. Native is also the better choice for long-running background jobs. Like their example, which is the point of sale app, has to download and sync a ton of data in the background so it can still process transactions even when offline. Do you know how painful it is to do transaction processing offline and syncing it back up? Ugh, it makes me feel sick. But the native layer is a lot more capable of doing those types of things. Good luck getting your JavaScript code to run in the background as you're switching between apps. Believe me, I've tried it. It is not fun. Not fun at all. I like this quote here a lot. Instead of thinking about native or React Native, think about native and React Native. It's right in the name, React Native. We found that you can save a ton of time by building most features just once using React Native and then leverage the native platform for the things it is best suited for. This is also why having native expertise is crucial. Okay, this is a big important point here. Debugging is worse. Yes, the tools for debugging and figuring out what's going wrong in a React Native app have improved a lot since I first said they were unforgivably bad, but they are still really bad. Thankfully, Meta is working on a complete rewrite, which, according to the people at Shopify, looks promising. That also sounds like they're not using it yet. We'll see. React Native updates are not seamless. I talked about this earlier. Migrating a big React Native app to a new React Native version, good luck, have fun. And more reliance on third-party libraries. I get why this is potentially a negative, but I think this is a really good thing overall. If you're not familiar with Expo somehow, I don't know why you're watching this, but it's a platform to make React Native development significantly easier. It's a set of tools to make building the app better, as well as a ton of different packages for all the native stuff you might want to interface with through React Native. Just look at the sheer number of packages these guys have put out. It's insane. If you want to do something like print to a printer on your local network, or you want to handle screen capture and screen orientation, or you want to process SMS messages using the native SMS APIs, or you want to put SQLite in your app, you want to manage the status bar, you want to be able to play video, you want to have thumbnails for video. That's a very annoying one. These types of problems are obnoxious to solve, be it native or React Native. So now there is good native code already written for you that you just call via a component. I remember when I had a really good Android engineer working on an app with me, I showed him the Expo AV package. He gave it a look because he had strong takes on how to do audio and video stuff on Android and hit me up blown away because he had never seen another project using the specific libraries that he really liked for video on Android, and they were. And now it's suddenly super easy to consume. You just use the Expo AV package. Once you've configured it in iOS and Android, you can just call audio.sound.createAsync, link it some MP3, and tell it to play. Do you know how annoying it is to get something like this working cross-platform normally? It's so good. It's so good. Yeah, so I get why there is concern relying on third-party stuff, especially if you rely heavily on it and any given piece goes out of date, or is it maintained well, or is it being audited properly? But if you build a bunch of those libraries yourself and reuse them and better understand the ones that you're pulling externally, maybe you hire the engineer who built this library that's really important to you, there's a big benefits and negatives here. But I would argue a company like Shopify benefits greatly because if any one of these libraries is important enough to them, they can just hire the person who made it. And they've done that. They've had a lot of luck with that. Also, one more note on the third parties thing. It's kind of funny that Shopify's bet so heavily on React because on their backend, they went the other direction. They went all in on Rails for their server side, which is both not very performant and fully encapsulated, where almost everything you need is either built into Rails or there's a tightly knit gem that does it. There is a culture of making gems for all sorts of other things, but the framework is much more complete than something like React and even something like Next.js. So the cultural difference there of an all-in-one solution on the back-end side and a piecemeal do-it-yourself solution that's more composable on the front end, it's interesting to see that gap. But I can also see that as a result, the culture of liking tools that bring everything is something that exists there, and that makes it a harder sell for React. They got over it, and all it gets is this short 2.5 paragraph section in this article, but it is an interesting, fundamental, foundational, philosophical thing. One more main section of their wins. The shared foundation unlocks a ton of leverage. When we first started using React Native, we didn't have years of experience building mobile apps with React Native like we did with native platforms. We couldn't leverage the shared data foundations that we had built over the years, so each team had to build things their own way. It wasn't worth investing in creating those shared foundations at the time because we were still learning how to build apps in React Native. One of my favorite examples of chaotic native sharing of code is actually right here with Twitch Chat. Twitch Chat has a really important feature, which is, let me see if I can find it in here. Non-mod settings. Here's where it'll be. Chat appearance, readable colors. This setting for readable colors is way harder to get right than one might think because readable colors needs to take the hex code a user set for their name and make sure it stays readable on web and mobile, in dark mode and light mode. Thank you, Snow Squire, for taking the hit here by turning your name black, because this is a dark mode, so that black username shouldn't be readable, but it is because I have readable colors on. So if I go here, chat appearance, turn off readable colors, suddenly the contrast on his name goes to shit and we can't read it anymore. So pretty simple, right? Just transform the color. Well, we want to make sure the colors are consistent across different platforms, specifically web, iOS, and Android. So we needed to write that transformation code in a language that worked on all of those platforms. Do you know what language works really well across iOS, Android, and web? Sadly, the answer is not JavaScript. Believe me, I wish it was. The answer for the language that the Twitch mobile team chose in order to make sure the color math was the same across all platforms, second guess was correct, C++. The code that transforms hex colors to be readable on different platforms is written in C++ in order for that code to be shared across all these platforms. What the fuck? That's all I have to say on that one. Anyways, I fully sympathize with Shopify struggling to figure out how to bridge this gap. The approach was great to hit the ground running quickly and migrate our apps, but it also caused teams to solve the same problem multiple times, reinventing the wheel. This is a conscious trade-off. We optimize for speed and consistency. But by the end of 2023, all of our apps were mature enough that we could start making them consistent. We have since started extracting common components like identity, real-time monitoring, performance measurement, etc., all into shared libraries that all of their apps can consume. This allows teams to avoid solving problems that have already been solved in other parts of the company. It also spreads knowledge and expertise, and every app automatically benefits from improvements that are made to these shared components. This is another one of those huge wins that's hard to put into words. When you work in an ecosystem that has packages and libraries that work really well, and your company buys into that, managing the monorepo is never fun. But once you get it all working, wins can now be felt much further across the spectrum. It might be harder to make any given change to one of those shared libraries, but once the change is made, the wins from it are felt way wider than they would be in other environments. It's a huge thing to have a platform that's shared across stuff, so one change can be felt across all of your stuff. This is also why stuff like the React compiler is so cool, because every React app can now hit a button and run better than it does today. That's an awesome win. So with all of this said, how is Shopify feeling for the future of React Native? They say it's bright. Meta's been a great steward of the project. We are seeing regular improvements with every release, and the roadmap is being heavily influenced by developer feedback. It is kind of crazy how tight the React Native team is with the community. The React Native team is way bigger than the normal Android team. But more importantly, that React Native team is super deeply integrated with a lot of other companies using React Native. As they call out here, companies like Microsoft, Amazon, Tesla, SpaceX, and Coinbase are all using React Native, shipping open source things that the React Native community benefits from, and talking to and collaborating closely with the Meta team. Microsoft built React Native for Windows and for Mac. Amazon is super involved in the attempts to compile React JavaScript code into native assembly in order to make their apps fly. I don't know what the hell Tesla and SpaceX are doing, but let's be honest, do they know? You get the idea, though. The community is thriving, and the React Native team collaborates closely with those key community members. Shopify is also a very good contributor. I want to be clear about that. They've been awesome from my experience and the experience of everyone I've talked to. Their contributions to React Native have been incredible. Even just the comms side, the fact that I can cite them as a counterexample to the Airbnb shit show is huge. They contribute by making code contributions to React Native, doing co-releases along with React Native, sponsoring highly impactful open source projects like the React Native Skia project, as well as Reanimated, as well as publishing open source projects like Flashlist, Restyle, and Top Hat. They're also bringing back the React Native Working Group, which is huge. The goal there is to bring senior leaders who are using React Native in their orgs to identify key challenges in the ecosystem, prioritize investments. You get the idea. React Native has come a long way in the last 5 years, but a lot of limitations that led to people not adopting it simply don't exist anymore. If you haven't tried using React Native in a while, now would be a good time to revisit it. We're going to continue working with Meta and the rest of the community to make it better. What a phenomenal article. This is so cool to see a proper reflection after years of shipping React Native, after a decade of its existence. What a win. Thank you to Shopify for being such an awesome steward of this community, and thank you to you for watching through to the end of this video. Let me know what you guys think. Are you more excited than ever to build mobile apps, or are you wishing that React never infected your phone in the first place? Let me know. Until next time, peace nerds.